Hey guys, welcome back to this week's youth video. Today we're going to talk about Daniel chapter 6, an event that happened just a couple chapters after the story of our friends Rakshak and Benny, or Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. So this one is about Daniel himself. Now Daniel was one of the advisors to the king at the time, but the other advisors to the king didn't like him, and so they wanted to get him out of the way. So what they did is they tried to find dirt on him, tried to find things that would get him kicked out of the position that he had. But they couldn't find anything because Daniel was a pretty good guy. He was upright. He was morally, he was all good. He wasn't corrupt. And so they couldn't find a way to kick him out. So they ended up going to the king, and what they did is they got the king to sign this bill that basically meant that anyone caught worshiping any other god would be thrown into a pit of lions. And the king was okay with this because the king didn't want people worshiping anyone other than himself. And he didn't consider the fact that one of his advisors, Daniel, was Jewish and would worship his God. And so what happens is the advisors catch Daniel praying because Daniel made no effort to hide this. Daniel would pray with the windows wide open, completely visible to the world. And so what happened is the king found out and unfortunately said, okay, well, we got to send him into the lion's den. And so he gets thrown into a pit of lions. And I'm sure you know the story. A couple days, or not a couple days, the next morning, they open it up and he's in there totally unscathed, totally safe. Now that sounds kind of familiar, right? Like that's basically the exact same story that happened to Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego when they were thrown into the furnace. And so what happens is this king, right after that, issues a decree saying everyone should worship the God of Daniel because he must be the one true God. Because again, we've seen that God protected Daniel. So we can learn a lot from this story and the story that we talked about last week as well. I'm gonna boil it down to 3 points that I think are really important. And the first one is prayer. Prayer is so important that Daniel was willing to risk his life over it. And we've talked a lot about prayer in this group as a youth group, both in Youth Alpha and in the book of James that we're talking about in the fall. Even back if you were in youth group last year with Lou, she spent a lot of time talking about the importance of prayer. And so prayer can be confusing and intimidating sometimes. It might be a little bit weird talking to God. And so if you find yourself in that boat, if you don't know what it means to pray, or if you are bored of the kind of normal prayers that you say all the time, let me know, because we've got some cool resources, some cool ways to pray. There are a lot of creative people who have come up with creative ways of talking to God, and I would love to share that with you. Praying is such a valuable thing. Being able to connect with God is so important. And so if you want more ways to do that, let me know. I would love to talk with you about that. The second point is to not fear. Things can be scary a lot of the time. Things are scary right now a lot of the time. It can often feel like we're in a furnace or a pit of literal lions. And the thing is that God doesn't necessarily promise that we won't ever experience fear. But what he does promise is that he will be right there with us in the midst of it. And so that ties back to prayer. It's so important to recognize that God is with you, that God is present, and to recognize that he promises to be with you no matter what, in struggles and fear and anxiety. And so we can rest in the fact that we know that God is present. And the third point is that hope motivates faithfulness. So these stories give us a sense of hope. They give us this sense of knowledge that God protects us, that God cares for us, that God is present with us, even in the midst of the darkest times that we experience. And so what that brings forth in us is motivation to be faithful and to care about our faith. And so maybe you don't know exactly what that means. Maybe you're going to church because your parents go to church. Maybe you're going to youth group because you got friends there and no other reason. And if that's the case, that's great. I'm glad that youth group is a place that you can meet with your friends and have a good time. But the message of God has so much more for us than that. The message of God gives us hope that we have a God who comforts us. It gives us hope that God will one day rescue his world. And it gives us hope that God cares so deeply for us, even when we don't care enough about him. And so If this is all new to you, and if you want to ask more questions about this, please shoot me a message. I would love to pray with you. I'd love to talk with you. I would love to just text back and forth with you, because there's so much comfort in following Jesus, and I would love to see that for you guys as well. So have a great week. I'll see you on Zoom on Wednesday.